Do you support Trump?
I do, but mainly I was hoping that we could talk about abortion because I think I have a pretty decent argument about that. Is that okay?
Is that the reason why you support Trump?
It's a big one.
Okay. All right. So what about abortion is the reason why you support Trump?
Okay, so I mean, I could go into the whole Christian thing, but I'm not gonna because I know that that's not really a valid argument when you're not Christian and most of the world isn't. I do believe in the separation of church and state. I do believe, however, though, that all human life is valuable, and so we should protect it. And I would understand in this if we talk about this, like instances of like SA and things like that. I understand, like that gets a pass. I just want to talk about specifically the mass majority of abortions that are like elective and are not necessarily like medically or from SA or something like that.
Okay, so there's a few things here. One is that Donald Trump hasn't put like a federal exception in place for those circumstances. So when you leave it up to the states, inevitably those particular circumstances, right, are restricted in certain states, which I think is horrible and atrocious. And if you don't want that to happen, well, then you shouldn't support Donald Trump's policies that relate to that. But if you want to talk about like the overwhelming amount of like typical abortions, one thing I would say that'd be relevant to look up because it's not just cellular life that I think we consider valuable. One thing I use as an example is that do you think it's pull the plug on an individual in your family that's brain dead? They're still cellularly speaking alive.
Yeah, I think that that's def. I mean, if you want to classify that as murder, but here's the thing: that person is not like usually those situations. That person is not going to wake up. There's been a situation where, hey, this person is brain dead; they are gone, and there's no chance that they're going to wake up or come back. So therefore, it is not necessarily done with malice, or you're not really ending something. It's already over.
Okay, so there's a few things here. When you say already over, what you're talking about is sentient life, not cellular life. If you consider cellular life valuable, well, that's not over yet. Technically, what you value is still there. But it seems like here you don't value cellular life, and instead you value sentient life, and you think that's over. Well, I would say in terms of abortions in the first trimester, for example, or prior to the point of sentience, is that it's not sentient yet, so it's not alive in that context.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And a lot of times, like, yeah, babies, it does take up to a certain week to become sentient. However, I think that if it were a situation going back to the brain dead example, if it were a situation where, hey, this person right now doesn't have any sentient life, but in 9 months they will, or 8 months or whatever, that's different because it's a developing the fetus, the baby, is a developing process. It's turning into this full quote unquote human that you may or may not think it is. But it is, it's in the process of developing. So it's going to become that as far as we know in the mass majority of situations. Versus in this, when you're again with the brain death, we know that that's not going to happen. And there's no medical research that it will happen. And so therefore, it's just a different situation that I think is difficult to compare the two.
Yeah, so really, like the view that I would point to here is that I don't think we just value a future alone. So it seems like you don't just value cellular life; you value the fact that there could potentially be a future. So then, like, here's kind of like this idea. For example, right? If it was the case that you have like a zygote in a petri dish, right, and you know for 100% fact that that's going to lead to a person in the future. Let's say you have two of them, right, and you're in a burning building. You have either those two zygotes or one newborn baby that you could save. Would you rather save the two zygotes or the one newborn baby?
Hmm. Yeah, this is the burning IVF clinic thing, and I've heard it. And this one has I've pondered this one a lot. It is a good question. Ultimately, I don't feel like it if I tried, let's say if I took the two petri dishes, right? And I ran out with them and I'm like, okay, I saved two lives. Ultimately, I did not because those two petri dishes outside of their environment are have zero chance of survival. As soon as I take them out of that lab, the sun hits them, they're
Let, let
not
me
in
let
an
me let me
actual
let me
environment.
clarify. Let me clarify. Like we know for 100% fact that they will survive if you specifically decide to save them. Let's say you have
Okay.
some capacity to save them in that degree. So like in this context, would you rather
Sure.
save the newborn babies, or the newborn baby, or or these zygotes?
I mean, again, I it's not possible. I understand. So what you're asking is an impossible situation. Do you admit that that's not at all even realistic? because I couldn't save it. Can you at least admit that there's no chance that this would actually happen? Because if I tried to take those two embryos out, they would die immediately. They probably
No,
already are dead.
we're saying that there's a capacity for you to be able to keep them alive. Let's say you know how to do so. This can happen. There is a capacity for people to do this. So obviously it is a potential. It is logically possible. The only point is that we're just testing the logic, and we're saying in this circumstance, what would you do? Just to essentially see where you place the values. Like, do you value a zygote that you know 100% does have a future the same as you value a newborn baby?
Well, and then I guess, okay, let's go with that then. Yes, I do value all the lives the same. However, when it comes the obviously when it comes to the newborn baby, it's already born. It's it's already a quote unquote alive, as you might want to say, right? And it's also got strong emotional attachments to a mother and father, most likely, just with what we're saying here. So although it would be very sad and very tragic for me to have to leave the two zygotes there, I don't want to do that. I understand that it would cause less human suffering for me to not save the zygotes and to save the full baby. It would cause less human suffering because you're right, at that stage in the petri dish, they can't physically feel pain. And although they do have a mother, father out there wherever, that's going to be very sad for them that they lost that. However, they are going to be able to try again, and there's more chances versus the parents who have this other baby. That's their baby. That's been already born. They have that child. So I'm trying to minimize human suffering here.
Okay, so if we look at human suffering in this context, we're trying to minimize that. Well, then we would say that people should be able to get access to abortion prior to sentience, because if they are getting an abortion, it's not going to cause any human suffering. But if you restrict someone's access to abortion, it does cause human suffering to the person that you are violating their rights. Right? Like if you're violating someone's right to bodily autonomy, if they're forced to go through a pregnancy, that is human suffering that's going to be caused to them. But there's no human suffering caused to like something prior to sentience. So if you want to minimize human suffering, then you would be pro-choice, actually.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I really do. That being said, that's where I kind of turn this back around and I say kind of where I came from before. I think we should value human life. Okay. And in a situation where you have to choose one to die, this or that, that's different. This is not really that situation. Like I said, in life of the mother situations, I am not against abortion. So yeah, if there was something where it's like the mother's going to there's a high chance that she's going to die, there's a high chance that something is, going to happen, then yeah, of course, I'm not against abortion. But in that situation, when we have the choice, right? When it's like, hey, you could have two healthy human babies or adult people, whatever, one mom, one baby, or you could just not, I don't think we should be choosing to kill.
I don't think child. I think pregnancy is a health risk, right? There's the health risk to every pregnancy, and I don't think that someone should have to go through a health risk alongside the fact that someone have to go through this without their consent. Right? I think those are both suffering and harm that are caused. I think a violation of a person's rights who's sentient is going to be harmful, and I don't think that's true for like the zygote or the embryo prior to sentience. If you get an abortion, well, it doesn't cause any suffering, because the capacity to suffer comes through having a subjective experience. That's what we're referencing in terms of suffering and the way that we're referencing it, right? We're not referencing it in a way that, could be applicable to microorganisms, right?
Sure. And there are, some percentage, I know it's a lower one, that are done after the second trimester. I would say that obviously does create suffering for the fetus, because at that point they have developed nerve endings and all those things. But also, I think it's difficult to say that abortion doesn't cause any suffering, because I do believe that, and this is not every situation, but it can cause the women
let me clarify.
Go through some.
Sure. No, I'm not saying there's no medical complications that can come from an abortion. That's not the claim that I was making. I was saying there's no human suffering that is caused to the zygote or the embryo because it doesn't have a capacity to suffer. And it's not just through nerve endings. You'd have to have a subjective experience to experience like the nerve endings having that particular type of response. It's kind of like after like an ant or something, or not an ant, like a certain bug is dead, you still see their like legs moving, even though they're already dead. It's like sort of like a biological response. It has nothing to do with an experience or anything like that.
Hmm. Sure. And I suppose then I would say, a bug, again, a little bit different. This is just because you're right. Maybe there wouldn't be any human suffering. Maybe it wouldn't feel anything. Maybe it would never know it existed. But is it morally right? That's what I'm kind of getting at here. And that's why I'm saying it's very difficult when you start to blur those lines about what's a human and when does it become a human and those types of
Sure.
things. And when do we give it rights? And I think that sometimes when those lines get blurred, we can get into some dangerous territory. That's all I'm kind of
Well, you
saying.
could say the same thing for the individuals who are brain dead, right? The same prescription could be said in that circumstance. That if you're willing to say that it's not, pull the plug in that circumstance, someone could say, well, it seems like the line is blurred to some degree because cellular life in this context wasn't granted that value. But I think that would be an absurd way to look at it.
Yes, but again, there's no medical research, there's no evidence that will back up that that brain dead person is ever going to come back.
Yeah,
Versus
I
in the
agree. I
vast
agree. But
majority,
I agree. But when we say come back, we mean in a subjective experience. We don't mean in terms of cellular life because they already are still there in terms of cellular life. But we don't think that's the basis of their personhood. We think their subjective experience is the basis of their personhood. Do you get what I'm saying there?
yeah, no, I totally do. I just think that there's a lot of potential for this baby to have subjective experiences and probably very early, a lot sooner than you may realize, because even by just, um, 9, 10 weeks, I would say around that first trimester area, those babies can already start developing, neurons and kind of like having senses and feeling things that they may not realize they're feeling. You know what I'm saying?
So what's more
So it's not
valuable?
that.
What's more valuable? Potential alone for a subjective experience in terms of a zygote or a fetus prior to conception, or not prior to conception, prior to subjective experience, right? Or right, someone restricting their having restricted access to abortion, not being able to have bodily autonomy.
I think, and again, I will restate this in situations of in life of the mother, 100%, yes. But in other instances, I understand that not everybody agrees with this, and you don't have to agree with it. And I'm not like, I don't hate people who don't agree with it, but I see it when you choose. So if it's not any of those three things, then it's something else, which in that situation would probably be that you had SMEX, right? And so I think that when you do that, there is a responsibility that comes with it. And you can use birth control and those things. We all know that nothing is 100% except abstinence. We know that for a fact. So you're taking on that you're rolling a dice. It's a really, really
I mean, you
small
can still
chance.
get if you're abstinent, which can still lead to you getting pregnant. But you're saying
And like I
should get to
said,
a
I
point for
don't
an elective
like I said,
abortion.
I said that I would make an exception for those types of
I do want
situations.
to clarify.
Essay.
You still are voting for policy that allows for it to occur from a perspective in terms of the law, like for it to be restricted in terms of the
Yeah,
access.
okay. Yeah, let's turn this back to him. Yeah. So when it comes to Donald Trump, this is what I'll say. I with him specifically, I know that when it comes to abortion, we're never going to have it all one way. There's always going to be this fighting between people, these different opinions. It's never going to be 100% perfect. And so I understand that. I'm going to side with the person who is a little bit more restrictive on abortion just because of my personal opinions and what I believe. That being said, I understand that when we're having a conversation, like, yeah, I'm never going to or rather, not when I'm having a conversation, when I'm voting for a politician, I'm not going to get 100% of what I want. That's never how it works. It's a give
Yeah,
and
but you're
take.
saying that's
So I'm
preferable.
talking more.
You're saying it's preferable. So what you're essentially saying is preferable is the amount of cellular lives that are saved prior to the point of sentience, right? In terms of abortion that will not occur in those specific states, rather than people having the right to get access to abortion or the victims have a right to get access to abortion, or those whose lives are at risk. And it's not just people whose lives are at risk; it's debilitating health concerns, right? Like people can have long-term disabilities, right? Because they didn't specifically get access to an abortion. And in that circumstance, that's not a threat to their life, yet they still should be able to get access to an abortion. And that can happen. And there's nothing from a federal perspective to limit that from occurring, right? Because there's
Yeah.
no protected access to abortion from a federal standpoint. So that's why, like, if you
Well,
don't impose a certain set of exceptions, well, then what you're saying is that you value, right? Saving those cellular lives more than people who have, debilitating health concerns because of this, who were pregnant or who are access to abortion in those different states because they specifically were born or live in a certain state.
Yeah. No, I hear you there. And I do disagree with that. Like kind of like what I was saying. This is I like I support it or I understand it in the situations of what you're talking about, SA and life of the mother. I think if I had everything that if I could have everything my way, right? If I could just make the laws, I would make a very clear distinction. A very clear distinction. Like ectopic pregnancy, life of the mother, absolutely not an abortion. Like it can't be. Like it's not the same thing. You are saving the mother's life on a non-viable pregnancy.
Okay,
There.
but like, do you
That's
understand the
one
point
thing.
that I was
Or
talking about? In situations where it's not specifically life, there's still risks, medical risks involved, and I think that those medical risks involved should be also talked about and addressed, and because like there should be an exception for that too. And the point I'm saying is that these exceptions are still inevitably not going to be put in place because of the fact that you decided to support Donald Trump, who wanted to leave it up to the states.
Mhm. So you think that state power in this situation is more negative? That's what you're saying?
Oh, totally, yes.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, and I mean, I can kind of get behind some of those ideas. I really can. I'm talking more in like a perfect world. And I'm trying because I feel like in this situation with specifically abortion and a lot of issues, honestly, and a lot of issues, it's very hard to find a solution that's like perfect for everybody. I'm talking more on like, can we find some moral ground on something? That's more what I'm digging for here. When it
I
comes
think
to
I
a
have.
federal level, absolutely. On a federal level, I totally agree that it's messed up. It's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be situations that are tragic. There's always going to be situations that are messed up no matter what. If we have abortions, if we don't have abortions. But like I said, I'm kind of trying to go person to person here.
But,
That's
but
all I'm
like,
trying to do.
what's more tragic? Some zygotes and embryos dying, right? Or people dying who were pregnant and sentient, or people having health concerns who are pregnant and sentient, or people having restricted rights who are pregnant and sentient. Like, I honestly care more about those that are going to be sentient and experiencing those things than like non-sentient embryos that are never going to have an experience ever, given that there was an abortion, right? Like, never will have an experience ever at any point in existence. So
Yes, because they were. How is that
well,
not
it's not prior to
already
the point of sentience. That's my
millions and millions of them were? That's why. And you
that's
took
not prior to
stolen
sentience.
from them. That was stolen from them. So
You could say the
that's
same
why
thing when
it's
people pull
tragic.
out, right? Or people utilize birth control. It's restricting the potential of there being a child.
Yes, but that the child hasn't been formed at that point. There's nothing
Okay,
wrong
well,
with
that well,
birth control.
what I mean by child will include a subjective experience. So what I mean by child does not exist at that point, right? So I care
No,
about the
it doesn't. It
people. I
doesn't
don't
for
care
me
about
either.
zygotes and embryos.
When you haven't like if you're using a birth control method to prevent pregnancy, you're right. There has not been a child. Like I agree with you on that. There's I'm totally pro um I'm totally pro like anti-conception methods and birth control methods. I have no issue with that.
Okay, so do you have an issue with IUDs that not
IUDs are a
only
little bit
can
of a tough one.
not only do they
Yeah,
prevent
because
fertilization, but they can
yeah,
also
no,
prevent
I
implantation?
actually yeah, no, I know all that. Yep, I've done a lot of research on those. Um, IUDs, and again, this is kind of going back to the situation where legally I can't have everything my way. I personally would not use an IUD because of that. But however, I know that the main mechanism of an IUD has a lot more to do with kind of stopping that ovulation, stopping that fertilization from happening. And if we were to potentially take those away because of the off chance that there was fertilization and the uterine lining was thinned because of the IUD and didn't implant, if I were to take the whole IUD away because of that small chance, it would lead to more abortions. I
Oh,
totally
so
recognize that.
would you be okay with abortion being legal if it led to less abortions?
That I don't think no. I don't that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in this situation with the IUD, it's a lot it's very uncommon. It
No, just
does
just to clarify.
happen.
If abortion being legal reduced the level of abortions that occurred in the long run, would you be okay with abortion being legal?
I don't think that are you talking about like unsafe abortion, abortions that
Well,
happen
I'm
like
just,
in back alleys and stuff
well,
like
I
that?
would say one thing in terms of leaving it up to the states is that it can incentivize people to get abortions quicker or get abortions when they wouldn't have otherwise gotten an abortion because it puts pressure on them on whether or not they'd actually be able to get an abortion like later on or be able to make that decision later on. So because there's such specific things about like, oh, you have to do it within the first few weeks, right? It is the case that it can incentivize people to have more abortions, right, in certain contexts.
And I think that that's really sad because I wish that we could find ways to reach out to these women and be, and you know what, that's on the pro-life community. Hey, I'm here to say that we need to do better 100%, and we're trying, but we're not doing good enough. We need to reach out to these women more and try to reach women more and be like, "Hey, listen to us. You don't have to do this. There are other options. We can support you. We can help." And
You
I
know,
think that like you guys say things like, "Oh, the pro-life community, you don't care about the kids after they're born." I 100% care. I 100% care, and I want to help these mothers. I've helped single mothers many, many, many times in my
what
life,
policies does
and
Trump pass to actually do so?
I mean, again, I'm a little talking more about the abortion here, but if you're the one thing that
Yeah,
happened
because that's the only
recently,
because like let's think about it this way. There's like going to be a few thousand lives that you might save specifically under this context of leaving it up to the states. How many are going to be lost in terms of lack of access to abortion, lack of access to food stamps, of lack of access to basic necessities?
yeah, with when it comes to Trump, I mean, I think that there's definitely a lot of things he could have done better. And I definitely think that there's things that Biden could have done better. And I think there's things that a lot of people could have done better. I do know that I heard, and you can fact check me on this if you want. I don't know 100% if it's true, but I did hear that during this shutdown, Trump was working hard to try to keep WIC funding up with the tariff money because of the fact that a lot of things did get shut down due to the shutdown. So
They actually
that's
weren't
one
sending
thing.
out SNAP funding when they could, based upon their own private interpretation of the law, which other experts were indicating was not the correct interpretation. So like I mean the actually they were the ones specifically like not allowing it to be sent out when it could have been sent out. Plus, his big beautiful bill cuts access to SNAP. Like I wanted to clarify that. Like it cuts 420,000 children off of free school lunch and breakfast on average every single month. Over 2.5 million people off their access to food stamps, and over 10 million people off their access to health insurance. And them not allowing for these particular like health subsidies through the ACA to exist, it's going to increase the premiums for Americans by 50 to 70%
Mhm.
who are on
And
this program.
and again, like I hear you 100%. I wanted to be a little bit more specific and like about just this one situation because I'm trying to find some ground. It's very hard to find ground and to try to find a little common ground and reach agreements when you're looking at, well, he also did this and then there was a big beautiful bill that did all these things and these. I'm just trying to I was trying to hone in on one thing. That's all.
Well,
Like, and
yeah,
I know that that's not like a realistic thing in life, but that's why we have the ability to talk like this.
yeah, I understand, but even if you focus in on that, it doesn't make Trump look better because the inevitable reality is that you are not minimizing human suffering by being pro-life. You would minimize human suffering by being pro-choice, genuinely, because
I
most
mean,
abortions
I'm
happen
not
when it's not
trying to
sentient.
make Trump look better. I don't really care if Trump looks better or bad at this point. Like I said, I was kind of more talking on like a moral standpoint.
Yeah, I
Just
addressed
let's
that.
have a
I don't know where you got. I
conversation.
didn't just say that. I said specifically that it minimizes human suffering to be pro-choice.
And that so now we're back to the whole thing with like you said, it minimizes the suffering of the women. And like I had said before, well, it's taking away, stealing the lives of millions of babies, in which we already talked about that. So I hear you that there's a lot of that, yeah, like there's really bad things that can happen without abortion, but there's also like a lot of bad things that can happen with abortion too. And so like yes, there is a yin and a yang. So I'm trying to find, like I said, some middle ground here by focusing on it instead of, jumping to like a million different topics.
I'm not jumping to a million different topics. I just want to acknowledge the fact that even if we just specifically focus on abortion, pro-choice is the way to go. Um, I genuinely don't understand why you would want to be pro-life. And it's not even like pro-life; it's like pro-forced birth. Like
So
genuinely, like
what is one thing that I have said? I just want to know. What's one thing that I've said that you've interpreted as that's not pro-life, she's pro-birth and she doesn't care about the babies after? Can you tell me one thing I've said that's said that?
Well, I mean, the life that we care about is sentient life. So I think it's pro sentient
But
life
I
to
didn't
be.
say that. I didn't
Well,
say that.
well, you actually did. I
You
mean,
said that.
you said that it's not pull the plug on an individual in your family that's brain dead. So they have cellular
That's I
life.
actually said that it that could be considered, but in that
Really?
situation when that
So
person,
the
yeah, it
so
could
then
be.
people should go to prison for really pulling the plug on individuals in their family that are brain dead. Doctors and nurses should go
No,
to prison for pulling the plug.
no, just like I don't think that you should get in trouble for paying for your girlfriend's abortion, like I heard earlier, because it's legal.
Okay.
I can't say like
No,
I
but
can't
do you
say, oh,
think
you should.
otherwise? Do you think it should be illegal?
I think that taking an innocent life before, like with no, medical issues with the mother in situation where it is not, I think that that should be illegal. But I understand we live in a world where it's never going to be perfect. I'm trying to find the greater good here. And I think that when it comes to the pulling of the plug, like I said, that person is no longer going to have that life that they lived. Although they are, yes, biologically alive, they are not going to have experiences in life anymore. That doesn't mean that they don't mean anything. It's just a tragic situation. These babies, they are going to have that life. They are going to have that sentience. And you're stealing that. And so I'm trying to understand how you think I'm
You could say the
pro
same
birth when
thing
all I
by
want
you
is for
could say
these
the same
babies
thing
to
by
have a
saying when
good
people use
life.
contraceptives, it reduces the likelihood of babies existing in the future. Just
In a
tragic.
very small percentage, yes. But I don't think
No,
that
it's
that's the
actually.
main
I mean,
reason.
it's a pretty high percent. There's less people who are forced to go through pregnancies now because of the fact that contraceptions exist.
And like I
Contraceptives.
said, I'm all for contraception. Like yes, use contraception. I am not against an IUD. I am not against the pill. I am not against condoms or obviously do it. I have
Yes,
no
but
issues with
it's
that.
reducing the potentiality of babies existing in the future.
On a pretty minor level. And
It's not a minor level. I mean,
that's and
most
you're
abortions
in
come from a
most of
failed
these situations.
contraceptive. So if you got rid of contraceptives, you'd have a lot more pregnancies.
Yes, but the situation that's most of the time contraceptives work
Yeah. So if
by
most of the time contraceptives work, then wouldn't
either
that
stopping
like heavily
ovulation.
reduce it?
The contraceptives mostly work, just generally speaking, by stopping your ovulation and by preventing the conception from happening. There are occasions that are rare where conception still happens and therefore it does not get to implant because,
Yeah.
maybe the uterine lining is thinned. I hear you on that. But the main line of defense is not that. And so, therefore, I am not going to say that all women cannot use IUDs because of this chance here. I'm not going to do that because I'm a realistic person. I mean, I'm not like, I'm a realistic person. I
No,
hear
but
all
what?
these things out and I want to make, a middle ground.
Yeah, what we were saying the distinction was that it's not cellular. It's not cellular life that you value. It's the fact that there's a future experience that will be there. It's what you value. We don't just value future experiences alone. You're valuing future over actual. Okay, there's an actual person who's pregnant who's actually going through an experience, and instead you value the future potential of something that will never exist if you have an abortion, over someone who is there already that does exist. I think at this
It
point
does
we're kind of
that.
just saying the same thing over and over again. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on this issue? On this issue, because I
Yeah,
honestly
no,
don't see
sure.
us
And
like
I really
progressing.
appreciate yeah. I really appreciate you talking to me. I've wanted to discuss this kind of thing with you. Um and I think that what you're saying on a cellular level and all those things, I would say when you say that, that person is, there's a person who's actually there, I would argue that there are two people that are there
Yeah,
because
I know
once that
you've
life
already
is
said this.
there,
Yeah, I get it. I get you. You
yeah.
say that already. Okay.
So, I'm glad that we talked though. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great night.
Before you leave, I have a question. Would you
Yeah.
vote for Trump if you were held civilly liable of a woman?
I know exactly everything that happened and I do not I don't Trump is not like necessarily a good person. I don't think that he's like a good person. I wasn't talking about him. I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation, but I really think that there's a lot of politicians that are severely corrupt and have done horrible things, including Trump, and I think that they should be held liable for it. Yes.
No. Would you vote for Trump if you were held liable of a woman?
Well, I mean, I voted for Trump in the last election, mainly because of kind of like what I was saying. There's a lot of things that I could go into, but I was trying to
So
just
you
talk
would,
about
yes?
this one. I am not planning, I mean, he's not going to be running again.
So look, so like again,
His
we're
last
talking.
term.
I think you know what we're talking about. We're talking about the idea that Donald Trump, if you could go back in time, you could either vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Who would you rather vote for? I'm saying, given the knowledge you had that Donald Trump was held civilly liable, would you still vote for him in that connotation?
Well, I guess my question is, what does this have to do with anything we were talking about? Because I told you straight
It
away,
doesn't.
like,
I
I
asked you if I
wanted
could
to
ask
have.
you a question at the end, and you said yeah. It didn't
Okay,
have to do with
sure.
what you were talking
I
about
hear
earlier.
you. I hear you. And you know what? I'd rethink it. I really would because I understand everything that happened with, E. Jean Carroll. I've looked a lot into that case, a lot. And I really would rethink it. I would because I think that there would be other options. It's kind of unfortunate that all the Republicans basically had Trump and that was kind of it.
So
So
you wouldn't support
I'll
Trump?
give you that one. I'd rethink it.
So you would or you wouldn't? You're just kind of in the middle now.
I said I would rethink it. I would rethink it. That's all I'm saying. Because like I said, I understand everything he's done
Understand everything.
wrong. I think that he like
That
obviously my viewpoints
rethink it
align a
doesn't
little
give
more
me
with him.
anything in specific. Rethink just means you're going to think about it. I mean, I'm asking you to think about it right now and
Oh,
give me
I
a
will.
response
I
based upon
will.
you thinking about it.
I will think about like I don't know what else you would want me to say, my friend.
You can't think about it right now?
No, I
Why
was
not?
trying to talk to you about a completely different situation. When it comes to Trump, I don't like the guy. I hear you. I was just trying to have a one
But
subject
you can't think
conversation.
about
That's
this?
all.
You can't think about this?
Okay, you know what? Just for you. No, I would vote third party for someone who is
Okay.
a little bit different than him. How's that?
All right.